so continuing on with our lecture on Korea as a Confucian society. So because of the civil service examination system that was based on Confucian scholarship and the Confucian tradition, we see that education becomes extremely exam-based. It's all about passing the civil service exam. And this is something that we then see as a result of this. Some would say that the current South Korean educational system also reflects this, because the South Korean educational system is very much exam-based as well. We can particularly see this when high school seniors, they are studying for the National College Entrance Exam, and the stress and the pressure that is accompanied by having to prepare for the national entrance exam is really just on another level. And for those of my Korean students who have gone through this, you know this all too well and are all too familiar with this. But this is perhaps a vestige of the emphasis on Confucian scholarship and the need to pass the civil service examinations during the Joseon Dynasty. And in particular, we see how this is manifested in the pressure that students feel today in order to enter one of the Sky Universities. I will ask you to watch portions of Sky Castle, the Korean drama, which dealt with this idea of the pressure that both students and parents feel for their children to study and prepare for the entrance exam and to then gain entrance to one of these elite universities, either Seoul National, Korea University, or Yonsei University, because they feel that in contemporary society, graduating from one of these universities really guarantees or ensures success in later life. All right, so going back to this idea of Confucianism, there are many different aspects to Confucian ideology and fundamental Confucian principles that supposedly linger on and remain and have influenced contemporary Confucian Korean society. So if we look at Neo-Confucianism itself, Neo-Confucianism, as I said, Confucius had focused on the art of good governance, whereas Neo-Confucianism is much more metaphysical and focuses on proper relationships. The idea that society functions properly when everybody understands what their proper relationship is. So if we look at Confucian ethics, the very fundamentals of Confucianism is this idea that society is based on interpersonal interaction, and so because everybody interacts with each other, you must cultivate yourself and you must cultivate your own personal ethics, because once you cultivate your personal ethics and others around you cultivate themselves, then this will result in proper interpersonal interaction. So there are 5 fundamental moral relationships. These are between ruler and subject, parent and child, husband and wife, elder and younger, and friend. And all of these have reciprocal obligations. So to give you an example between this relationship between ruler and subject, the ruler, the king, has obligations to take care of his people and to rule over them in such a way that benefits all of his people. but the subjects also have obligations to the ruler, and they must show loyalty to the ruler and obedience. And so if the ruler says, okay, you need to pay taxes or you need to serve military duty, then it is your obligation as the subject to obey and to show loyalty to the ruler. So these relationships are not equal. The king is higher than the subject, so they are not equal. It's a hierarchical relationship, but there are reciprocal obligations involved. So harmony is valued over equality, and the idea that these relationships are hierarchical, like it is natural for the ruler, the king, to be higher than the subject. It is natural for the parent to be higher than the child. So because this is natural, it is therefore moral, and it is thus necessary to preserve these hierarchies and to respect the hierarchical relationships. There are certain key virtues that are emphasized within Confucian ideology, such as sincerity, reverence, mindfulness, benevolence, filial piety, etc., etc. And so what this has now been passed down as is the idea that there is no I in relationships, because every individual is defined by one's roles or relationships. There really is no I, because as soon as you are born, you already are in a relationship with your parents, right? So you cannot define yourself as just I, or just as an individual apart from any of these social roles and relationships. And so in order to understand what your proper role is and the appropriate behavior associated with your role, this is what will contribute to a harmonious Confucian society, when everybody understands what their proper role and relationship is. So, so for, let's say, myself, as I am a parent, I am also a daughter, I am a professor, I am a student to my advisor. In each of these roles, I need to understand what the proper behavior is and the proper attitude is. So for me, as a daughter, to behave as a professor is not appropriate. That would be me not understanding what my proper roles and in the relationship is. So everybody has to understand this, and in order to understand this within Confucian society, the way to understand what your proper role is to participate in Confucian rituals. So for example, ancestor rituals, honoring your deceased parents, honoring your ancestors. Once you start participating in these rituals, this helps you to understand exactly where your place is in the family and in society. And once you understand this, this is what contributes to a harmonious society. So, this emphasis on hierarchy is really reflected in many different aspects of contemporary Confucian society. So, for example, in the language, we have a language, the Korean language. There are different levels within the spoken language where it honors the person you are speaking to, and you humble yourself. These are called honorifics, or 존댓말 and 반말. And so this hierarchy is reflected in the language itself. we see these kinds of um, um, characteristics and values that are also reflected within the family. So we see that, for example, during major holidays, Chuseok, which is coming up, or Seollal, and you do the big bow um, to your parents or to your grandparents, and this is a sign of respect and filial piety to your family. We see this persistent in contemporary Korean society. Where does this come from? Well, we see that understanding one's place in the family is also a result of the production of these clan genealogies, or the family, the chokbo. And within the clan genealogy, you see that every person in the family, you see exactly what their place is within the larger clan. And this defines your relationship with other members in your clan or in your lineage, and it just makes it extremely clear as to what your place is within the family. And so when you are performing these family rituals, the funerary and memorial rituals, everybody knows what their role is, what they should be doing within the ritual, and showing respect for these lineage relationships. And this goes down not only to just the family, the average family, but also all the way up to the royal family. So the king, because the king is supposed to be the moral example for all of society, the king must also perform these kinds of rituals. The royal rituals are much more elaborate than everyday people rituals. But we see that the king must honor the royal ancestors, and we see that at Chongmyo there's also a Confucian royal shrine and Confucian rituals that must be performed. You can go to Chongmyo today, maybe not like today, but you can go these days and see these kinds of rituals being reenacted. But this idea of ancestor rituals is extremely important in reminding oneself of one's place within the family. All right, so just as kind of a side note, American Christian missionaries, when they first came to Korea and they saw Koreans performing these ancestor rituals, they described it as ancestor worship, because they would see these Koreans and they were bowing to the ground, and it looked to them like false worship to false idols. But this is not worship. This is just showing the utmost respect to one's ancestors. All right, so how did this affect women? We see that because the family unit is so important in Confucian ideology, it's not, whereas in Western societies, the individual is the basic unit of society. In Confucian society, it's the family that's the basic unit. So the family must be regulated properly and must function properly in order for society to prosper. So we see that there is a ranking order of the wives. The primary wife takes the priority, and then the secondary wives are below them, and their children are also then distinguished. We see a difference between the children of primary wives and secondary wives. And what this means then is that we begin to see throughout the Joseon dynasty that there's regulations for women in terms of their behavior. So, for example, a proper woman, she needed to follow the 3 obediences, which is a young woman first must obey her father. When she gets married, she must then obey her husband, and then later on, if her husband dies, she must obey her son, who would become the head of the household. There is a separation of the sexes around the age of 7 or 8 years old, so boys and girls were separated, and for widows, it was considered to be extremely improper for a woman to remarry. But what we see then is that this begins to have an effect on interpersonal relations within the household. So, for example, because the oldest woman in the house, the mother-in-law, had the most power, we see that there's quite a bit of writings about how daughters-in-law are to act properly towards their mother-in-law. And then if we come down to contemporary society, we see that there's this, again, this like power struggle and conflict between the mother-in-law and the daughter-in-law, and we see this reflected in a lot of media, in movies, and in Korean dramas. Another way that we see this reflected in the media is the idea of hierarchy and a social hierarchy. So the upper class and the lower class. This was most recently, we could see this in the very, very successful movie Parasite, where we see a very distinct division between the upper and the lower classes. We also see this reflected in politics, where there's this idea of a very authoritarian figure, ruler, paternalistic control, which you have top-down type of control from Syngman Rhee to Park Chung-hee and Chun Doo-hwan, and so we see this continuation of this kind of top-down authoritarian or paternalistic political control of the people. And this is also reflected in the way that the Korean conglomerates are constructed, because they are oftentimes family businesses. So you have the head patriarch at the top here, and then usually the sons, who then are considered to be the heirs to the businesses, and then their sons and daughters, their children, then also take over various aspects of the conglomerate. So this is also considered to be kind of a Confucian style of running the business or running the government. So what I'd like you to do is to take a look at a few videos that describe how Korea is a Confucian society. And I'd like you to also take a look at how perhaps this is reflected in contemporary Korean society. And let's explore this a little bit deeper as to whether or not this is really considered to be, can we attribute this to Confucianism, or is maybe something else going on? All right, so this is the end of the lecture, and I will see you after you watch the videos for discussion.